This is DW News Africa. Coming up on the program, as mass kidnappings and attacks on communities spread, is Nigeria facing a security crisis it can no longer contain? The soldiers confronting these threats describe life on the front lines as under-resourced, unsafe, and increasingly unsustainable. We'll look at what this means for Nigeria's future. Also coming up, celebrating courage. We meet the recipient of this year's German Africa Award, a Zimbabwean democracy activist who's fighting for fellow citizens despite the painful cost. Plus, tackling the growing mountains of cast-off clothing flooding Africa. How Kenyan creatives are taking fast fashion waste from dumps to the runway. Welcome to the program. Nigerians are growing increasingly anxious about the surge in violence across the country's north and central regions. The crisis has prompted President Bola Tinubu to declare a nationwide security emergency. In just 1 week, gunmen kidnapped more than 300 children and teachers from a Catholic school in Niger State, another 25 girls from a school in Kebbi, and abducted dozens of worshippers from a church in Kwara. 10 northern states have now shut schools over security fears, and so far no group has claimed responsibility for any of these attacks. Now, the US is paying close attention, especially to attacks on Christian communities. President Donald Trump has warned that Washington may step in if they are not protected. Nigeria's government insists that the violence affects everyone, but that offers little comfort to many Nigerians who are watching the crisis deepen. So we asked Nigerians how they feel about the idea of foreign intervention.
I strongly support American intervention in Nigeria because the country is unable to contain the growing insurgency. The situation has become dire.
Well, Nigeria is a sovereign nation. So as a sovereign nation, Nigeria should be able to solve its own political problems.
I accept US to come. I accept them to come. Any kind of intervention they want to come, and as long as it stops the killing. But the killing is too much, like every day.
I don't think if it is in terms of sending troops to come and invade the country in the name of in the name of restoring security, I don't think it will go well for our country.
I want them to come and help us. We need help. Nigeria is in danger, so I think we need their intervention.
U.S. military intervention is not the best for now. Rather, what we want from U.S. is collaboration.
Now, as communities bear the brunt of these attacks, Nigeria's security forces are under pressure too. They're stretched across multiple crises, including a long-running jihadist insurgency. Soldiers on the front line say they're fighting with little equipment, low pay, and poor living conditions. DW correspondent Azizat Olaoluwa looks at the challenges facing the soldiers asked to keep Nigeria safe.
This footage was sent to DW News by a Nigerian soldier showing the living condition of his unit on the front lines. He has been fighting in the country's northeast for 4 years, the epicenter of Nigeria's insecurity. We won't mention his real name and location. His real voice will also not be used to protect him from getting punished like others, he says, shared similar clips online in the past. We will call him Soldier X.
This is the place where soldiers are living. We face challenges during rainy season because of the leaky roof. We put tarpaulin up here, but it doesn't help much. So when rain falls, water pours in.
Soldier X says those serving on the front lines face many challenges besides poor living conditions. And he sent this additional text saying,
"We don't have enough arms and ammunition. Each soldier has 2 magazines and 30 rounds are loaded into each one. If the 60 rounds finish, that means they have endangered our lives. That is why you hear stories about soldiers running away from criminals or getting killed because we don't have enough weapons to fight them."
Nigeria has less than 300,000 active personnel in the military serving a country of over 200 million. For years, Nigerian soldiers deployed to the northeast have posted videos like this online, complaining about food, inadequate weapons and meager support, making their work all the more difficult and dangerous.
Our soldiers, our military, they need to be motivated. We have soldiers out there that their salaries in a month is still not up to the minimum wage.
Nigeria has been fighting a 16-year insurgency with Boko Haram and its offshoot, Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP. Different criminal gangs are also operating across the country, with thousands killed and millions displaced. Clashes among Christian farmers and Muslim herdsmen have also worsened its security situation.
Nigeria is now number 6 in the latest Global Terrorism Index as the country experiences a resurgence of violence by jihadist Boko Haram and other armed groups. Apart from civilian casualties, hundreds of soldiers have been killed in attacks on army bases and ambushes by militants who are believed to own more sophisticated weapons than the military.
The outcome of an investigation called by the then Army Chief, Lieutenant General Olufemi Oluyede, into a social media video showing soldiers complaining about poor food has not been published. The Army considers public complaints by soldiers as a breach of military ethics and discipline. But Nigeria's Minister of Information assures us that everything is fine.
These are just isolated instances. You find, as always, disgruntled elements of the armed forces, putting out such kind of video. But on the whole, I think this is not the direction. I think many of them are happy with what government is providing for them.
But Soldier X says the military leadership is not honest about soldiers' welfare.
It's a lie. I repeat, it's a lie. They are not doing anything for us. Nothing. They are lying to the president that soldiers are living well. But it's not true. We are suffering.
The new army chief, appointed by President Bola Tinubu, has assured that the welfare of the troops remains top priority. But it won't be the first time such a promise was made.
We're joined now by international security analyst Fola Aina from the Department of Development Studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. It's good to have you with us. We've just seen in our report soldiers in Nigeria ill-equipped to do their jobs on the front line. How can one of Africa's largest armies be lacking the tools to do its job?
Thank you very much, Tommy, for having me on. So as much as it sounds like a surprise, this is a reality a lot of African countries are currently confronted with. To be able to effectively respond to the current security challenges, there's a need for the employment of new technologies and equipment. And some of these, for instance, include unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. They also include intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance aircrafts, most of which require heavy advanced technology, for their deployment. And unfortunately, countries like Nigeria do not necessarily have, these technologies in place. And so they are mostly dependent on having to acquire them, from abroad. And now the process of purchasing some of these equipments are not just a straitjacket approach. They require lots of factors that go into place, from the moment of procurement to the moment of delivery. And so in many ways, this could explain some of the gaps and delays that some of these African militaries, including Nigeria, are having to confront with and deal with.
We're seeing a wave of kidnappings and attacks, and I'm just wondering if that, for example, has to do with a sudden international attention in it, or is it something else that's driving this wave of insecurity?
So it's important to also note that given the current international attention this situation on the ground has generated, non-state actors, whether they are bandits, whether they are jihadi groups, would naturally want to take advantage, of the attention that has come their way, and that's in many ways why you can also see that they may be leveraging on some of this media coverage and attention that they are getting to embolden themselves towards instigating more conflict on the ground and also more attacks, because they know that by doing so, they're able to generate more attention towards their cause and potentially, generate the prospects of having new recruits join, their fold. So again, let's be reminded that some of these organizations mostly thrive on propaganda and false information dissemination, which they use to their advantage, against the states.
With what's within the capacity of Nigeria, what would it take to actually turn the situation around?
First of all, address the underlying root causes of the problem in the first instance. Make it less, attractive, for people or for non-state actors to be able to pick up arms against the state. And when you look at this, one of the first things that needs to be done is to head-on tackle the issue around poverty. Poverty has been seen in many ways as a significant contributor or driver towards conflict escalation. The second thing here is the issue around inequalities. Inequalities needs to be addressed as well. There are issues around unemployment. There are issues also around mass illiteracy. And then when you look at the political side of things, there are issues bordering around the continued weakening of political institutions, state institutions, which makes it difficult, to be able to address some of the issues bordering around conflict. You also think about issues bordering around marginalization, persistent marginalization, and also poor governance. And then there are also the environmental dimensions to all of this. So you think about environmental degradation exacerbated by climate change, and how climate change in this sense has served as a trigger, as a force multiplier, of conflict on the ground. And then also when you think about the diversity and the place of ethno-religious conflicts also, how sometimes issues bordering around existing tensions become escalated. Intolerance in some instances can also fuel some of the tensions we see on the ground. A few examples of some of the things that can be done more rigorously, militarily, would be the need for the deployment of more special operation forces and the creation of forward operating bases that involve special operation forces, giving their unique training to be able to respond to asymmetric warfare, and also the need for more covert action. All right, there's a need for the military to pay more concerted effort at infiltrating, some of these non-state armed groups and trying to destroy and degrade them from within.
Can Nigeria realistically fix this on its own, or does it need outside help? And I'm talking more than just intelligence sharing. Can Nigeria do more with outside help?
No country is an island on its own. Nigeria, to a large extent, could leverage the relationship and goodwill it already has from the international community, particularly with regards to partnerships. But let me say emphatically that any effort to address insecurity in Nigeria has to be one that has Nigeria taking lead in collaboration with its other partners. At every point in time, even the most powerful countries in the world need help from other countries. Nigeria currently is in that state. It recognizes it's in that state. It has reached out for help. But as I said very clearly and very emphatically, for Nigeria to get out of the woods, it must be able to leverage its relationship with other countries, and whatever cooperation, it has to be Nigerian-led, not any other way around. Thank you.
International security analyst Fola Aina, thank you very much for speaking to us and giving us your insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now we're about to meet an extraordinary woman who's been fighting for civil rights in Zimbabwe and has paid the price for it. When she was just 18, Namatai Kwekweza founded a nationwide youth leadership organization protesting economic hardship and the lack of democratic spaces. But this came at the price of later being thrown into prison and tortured. Namatai Kwekweza has become a leading voice in Zimbabwe's social justice movement. Her organization, We Lead, trains young leaders and pushes for their inclusion in political decision-making. And she's now been awarded the 2025 German Africa Award for her courage and her work inspiring a new generation. And with me now in studio is Namatai Kwekweza, the recipient of the 2025 German Africa Prize. She's the regional director of We Lead Africa. Congratulations, Namatai. It's good to have you with us. What does this recognition mean to you?
So thank you so much for having me in studio today. The first thing I wanted just to say is that this recognition is a very powerful recognition, and not just to me, but to our organization, our team, and the young people in our constituencies that we've worked with for the past 8 years. This is a full circle moment because, when I started this organization, I was 18. And it's quite unusual that you have young women, in their activism, leading institutions that are able to make such a significant impact. So this award goes beyond just me, but I think it is the representation of the collective dreams, imaginations, and hopes of the young people that we are working with. And definitely it means that there is an awakening towards youth leadership, and particularly the leadership of young women, and also willingness to recognize it and support it across the continent.
Right. And help us understand the space in Zimbabwe in which you work, the civic space, the democratic space, for people who are not familiar.
That's fantastic. So in Zimbabwe, in terms of the civic space and the democratic space, we have unfortunately experienced a lot of regressions. And I think it's not something that is peculiar or unique to Zimbabwe only, but it's something that we are seeing across the world. I think that when you look at the civic space, we have seen the introduction of the Private Voluntary Amendment Act, which is basically meant to stifle NGOs. Everybody has to re-register. We have seen the introduction of more draconian pieces of legislation, such as the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act. We have seen the introduction of the Patriotic Act. And all of these are pieces of legislation that are increasingly making civic space quite repressive. But I think a major characteristic that we have seen is just a repulsion to, certain civic and political rights, the rights together. It's becoming increasingly difficult for people to convene. A crackdown on media freedoms, so the right to freedom of expression and the rights of journalists consistently are being violated. So, for us in Zimbabwe, it is a time that we have to really look deep within ourselves and to ask ourselves, is it really worth it and meaningful, to fight to protect and preserve democratic and civic space? Because we have seen a gradual regression, definitely.
And that includes your experience being pulled off a plane, locked up, put on trial. What did that experience, that ordeal, teach you about activism in Zimbabwe?
Okay. So, look, when you are an activist, I think these things do come, and I think they come often at times when you least expect them. I never expected that in my own country I would, have the security system ground a whole plane. The plane was ready to take off. The engine had started, but they turned off the engine, they opened the doors, and they extracted us. I never thought I would be abducted. I never thought I would be held incommunicado and eventually imprisoned. And I think that particular experience has really taught me that, there is a true cost to struggle. And unfortunately, for us to get whatever, gains of democracy, whatever gains of freedom that we aspire for, we have to pay the price in full. And sometimes it's going to happen in very unexpected ways. The last thing that experience taught me is to trust in my own power, but also to believe in solidarity, because there were a lot of people that came through for myself and the colleagues that I was held with. And I do have a faith in the unbreakable will of people, and particularly people-to-people solidarity. And I do have faith in the unbreakable aspects of the human spirit.
Right. But that's not easy, especially with what you experience, what many young people across Africa are experiencing. We've seen suppression of youth activists across the continent. How would you convince other Africans that this is worth the risk?
So the thing about it is that we are living at a time where we have seen a lot of regressions, particularly in democracy. And I think that when you look at it, even the places in the world that people thought they could run to are either not willing to receive people, or they're also not democratic themselves anymore. So the reality of the matter is, for a lot of people, and unfortunately this is the reality, this is what the statistics are saying, that over 70% of the world's population is now living under an autocracy. That's quite different from about 30, 40 years ago, where it was less than 40%. So the world is becoming an increasingly dark place. And we have to come to terms with the realization that if we want to live in a better world, we want to have a brighter future, we want to have, lives that are filled with dignity, lives that are filled with opportunity, where we have access to good healthcare, where we have access to good education, where people are able to, as Barack Obama says, speak their mind freely and not hear a sudden knock at the door, right? We actually have to step our foot down and do something about it, which often means that we have to confront systems of power, systems of oppression, systems of tyranny. And the reality of the matter is that there will always be backlash. You could find yourself abducted or in prison, like what happened to me at some point. But I also then always make people this invitation, right? It's difficult, it's hard to wake up and not be able to afford 3 basic meals a day. It's difficult and it's definitely hard to be arrested and imprisoned for speaking truth to power. It's also very difficult and hard, for you to, be abducted or to have them disappear or to lose loved ones or to lose property, etc., in the struggle for democratic freedoms. But what's also hard is to live a life with no opportunity, with no possibility, with no dignity. So I think it's also important that we as Africans, especially as African youth, choose what kind of hard we want to experience, the hardships of trying to change the system to make it better, or the hardships of expecting or accepting to live life as it has been given to us.
Would you say that's what keeps you going?
What keeps me going is solidarity. I think that and that's really my point of emphasis, that I'm believing in the power of us doing things together, and I'm believing in the power of people that have a shared mindset, a shared belief, coming together and working together. And that is what keeps me going. I do also have a radical core and a radical belief in the unwavering faith that every person born, every person alive is deserving of living a life that is full of opportunity and possibility. And I think the only way that can be achieved is if people live in environments where their rights are respected, where there is rule of law and there is generally democracy. So I think that is principle, that is core. But I think beyond that, when there are hardships and there are difficulties, I have received love and help from strangers. I remember once when I was released from prison, I had a young man from Denmark send me a message on LinkedIn, and he was saying that he wanted to send me money for my legal fees. I don't know him, but he'd say that he had heard my story from a Zimbabwean young woman who actually is learning there. And I told him that I do have legal aid. I had a team of lawyers that were already assisting. But I think it's in those moments when you know that there are people who think about you, who remember you, who have you in their thoughts, in their minds, in their prayers, and who are also willing to show up and step up materially, who are willing to show up and step up by posting, by sharing, by talking to other people. That, for me, keeps me going.
Namatai, Kwekweza, thank you very much for speaking to us. Thank you for your time, and congratulations once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kenya is the world's biggest importer of second-hand clothes, much of which ends up in the country's busy open-air markets. But a lot of it also ends up in mountains of textile waste. Now, in Nairobi, a group of young creatives show how discarded clothing can be given new life.
This is Nairobi's biggest dump site. Mountains of rubbish, sky high. It's not just regular waste. Countless items of clothing can be found here, thrown away by the global north. To some people, there's value to be found here, from curtains to women's shirts and kids' jackets. Every week, another ton of textile waste arrives here. We've seen a lot of clothes here from different labels, from Europe, from the US, often made in China. And while a few of them can be used again, many of them just end up here on this dump site, the biggest dump site in Kenya, which keeps on growing day by day. 10 kilometers away is Nairobi's biggest second-hand market, Gikomba, a place where such clothes were actually supposed to get a second life. The clothes are imported and sold to local traders in bulk at a cost of between $50 to $115 per bundle. What traders can't sell goes to the rubbish tip. But there are people who want to change this. A group of fashion designers and filmmakers want to show that it's possible to turn one person's trash into another's treasure. They're preparing a fashion show at Gikomba Market. Cut-up jeans, worn leather, and studded belts. All you see here is thrifted and upcycled. It's the brainchild of Luka Wakarindi, who herself owns a store at the market.
We want to undo the idea that every item that you find on thrift is not, it's waste, because it's not, because I have been able to build a career out of the pieces. But then I'll also tell you that whenever we are thrifting, you find so many pieces we can't use,
Luka thinks the clothing should be sorted through properly before it reaches Kenya, so that less of it ends up in landfill. Some designers are going to extra lengths to use unwanted fabrics.
This was like a curtain, but it was a one-off piece, so people don't usually take those. Like this year, we have used like mix and match because it was such a small piece, because the whole sense of us upcycling, we want to move from the mistake that was done maybe in Europe, where they made something that was not wearable, something that was not like consumable.
By that he means clothing disregarded by fashion houses because of small production errors. Both the designers and show organizers believe that the issue of textile waste needs all hands on deck, starting with the brands who they say should take on more responsibility for the waste they produce, and the customers abroad who should think twice before turning their backs on unwanted clothes.
So the show seems to have been a success. The people in the second-hand market feel that their work is valued, and some of the items at least got another life.
With trucks of clothes rolling into the market every day, it's clear that not all of them can be turned into glamorous outfits. But the designers here hope to have inspired a different way of thinking about fashion and waste.
Well, that's it for now. Be sure to check us out on social media and our website. There's more stories there. Bye for now.